And welcome to Buffalo Rumblings Live. My name is Matt Warren on a nerd headset and my brother's computer. And welcome to Buffalo Rumblings Live. I'm joined tonight by Brian Galliford, editor-in-chief of BuffaloRumblings.com. And Brian, is there anything we could talk about today?
We could talk about whether or not people can see you tonight. I mean,
I don't know yet.
I feel like that's something we can cover right off the bat. Or, the Stevie Johnson trade and the Sammy Watkins pick and all that pizzazz.
Wait, we're going to start with whether people can see me and that other stuff is still on the table?
I mean, we'll get to that other stuff real quick. Don't worry.
All right, well, why don't we start with Sammy Watkins? What do you think of the trade of the Bills to move from number 9 to number 4 and give up next year's first-round pick and next year's fourth-round pick to acquire, well, who is obviously number 1 on their board?
I think I love the player. I think pretty much everyone really likes the player. I'm still sort of trying to get my head around the trade. I wrote a 1,000-word article about it last night, but it didn't really help me get my mind around it. It was a lot. It was probably, maybe aside from the Cornelius Bennett trade, the biggest trade they've ever made in franchise history in terms of, just draft day deals. So
that's probably accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that earlier today, and just not necessarily in terms of what the impact will be, just in terms of wow factor, just what they gave up. It was huge. It was really a huge deal, and I think you put it pretty well on the site today when you said it just showed that Doug Whaley had conviction in the guy, and he just needs to be right now. I love Sammy Watkins as a prospect, though. I think the Bills are significantly better at wide receiver today than they were at the end of the season, and I think they're in good shape right now.
Okay, we're getting a little bit of feedback, I guess, on the mic. You're not on speakers or anything like that, are you?
Me?
Yeah, you.
I'm on the exact same setup I was last night.
Yeah, but I'm not, so I don't know if that changes anything. And I'm on the nerd headset, and there's nothing coming through my speakers, and it sounds fine to me. So the guys.
Are you saying that people can't hear me? What are we?
No, they can hear you. It's like listening to 6 conversations at once, and they said it was fixed. So okay, I don't know what happened. Doesn't really matter.
All right.
This is live. Well, I'd say television, but it's definitely not television because nobody would let me on television. Okay, so yeah, as you alluded to, I wrote on the website. I wrote last night and a little bit this morning. I'm just glad that they had the conviction to go get their guy, and I think they did it last year when they took E.J. Manuel with their first pick. They traded down and took the first quarterback on the board, and I think they did it again this year when they swung a trade. And we can talk about trading 2 first-round picks for Sammy Watkins, really all we want, and I think that's something I want to get into next week after kind of the dust settles. But I like the fact that he loves Sammy Watkins enough where he said to himself, well, Doug Whaley and Russ Brandon really both said to themselves, I have to go up and take him. And even if they look down the line and were like, well, I guess my job's on the line or this, that, or the other thing, Doug Whaley always says it's results-based business and his job's always on the line. So I'm glad that he made a decision to move up. And I know a bunch of other people talked about it today. I was listening to WGR on my way to work and my way home, and I know Mike Schopp was very glad that he showed the guts this afternoon, and Paul Hamilton used that term guts. I like to think I put it a little bit, in a little bit more favorable opinion of Whaley. I think he has convictions and he knows what he wants out of his team, and he's not afraid to go get it. And that was the quote that Peter King used on MMQD this morning. And I love that someone went in on it, whether it's because they have the smallest chip stack because he's staring down the barrel of getting fired or not. I just love that he had the conviction to do it.
I could tell that you loved it because you sent me like 25 text messages in 3 minutes last night as the whole thing was going down, and I'm trying to get a post up on the site, and my phone is buzzing off the hook, and it literally is only you texting me, so I can tell that you really were into the move. Talking about guts, I think that's actually the term that I would use as well. Maybe something a tad saltier. It really is. There is a dichotomy, I think, in the thought process between focusing on the 2014 season, which is clearly what the folks at One Bills Drive are doing right now, and focusing on anything past that. I mean, they flat out denied that they're in win now mode to appease new ownership, try to keep their jobs beyond this season. But there's so much subtext to what they're doing that it's pretty clear that they are, in win now mode to make the playoffs and to make sure that they do everything they can to actually have that long term with the Bills.
And Doug Whaley did make reference to that when he was talking to Peter King. He said stuff like, these people have been out of the playoffs for 14 years, and he kept turning it around a different way and kept saying 14 years over and over again. But the urgency that they traded up to 4, they gave up a first-round pick. And Doug Whaley always talks about building through the draft, and to see him make that move it just means the world to me. It shows me how much they love Sammy Watkins. Still do, I would assume. I doubt anything's changed in the last 12 hours or whatever, almost 24 hours. So Tim Graham posted a great article on the Buffalo News today. He had a source inside the Bills draft room that gave him a bunch of tidbits of information about how the whole trade went down. Would you have been upset if the Bills gave up, I think the initial offer from the Browns was a third-round pick this year and the number 9 overall pick? Would you have been upset with giving them next year's first-round pick and this year's third-round pick as opposed to next year's fourth? Would that have mattered to you?
I don't know. I mean, it's, I guess from the broader perspective, I mean, we're fans. We're with the team past this season, regardless of what the current regime is. It's sort of 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other. I'm fine with them deferring that pick to next year because it gives them the option to have 2, at least contributors, maybe even starters if they're lucky, come out of tonight's rounds 2 and 3. So I think that's sort of the thought process that they went into that trade with. They want to do everything they can to keep the picks they have this year because they need them if they want to make that playoff push.
And I agree with that, and I think that has a lot to do with the sense, not just the sense of urgency, but the sense of all in with EJ. Like, we need these picks this year to protect him or to build the defense or whatever it is. And really, we don't care about mortgaging a small part of the future, but we're definitely going to keep the picks we have in this year's draft. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. That if any picks had come into play this year, I think it would have been a little bit tougher for Willie as well, which is why you didn't see the number 2 pick or anything like that being used. Are you surprised it was the Browns?
No, I mean, not any more surprised than I would have been if it was any other team. But I mean, they're all sort of on equal footing, and I mean, Cleveland is known. This is not the first time they've traded down from high in the draft. It's not the first time they've traded up to number 22 to take a quarterback. They're kind of known for wheeling and dealing on draft day, regardless of who's in charge. So I mean, once Jacksonville took Bortles, which, by the way, I think that's kind of when they just went after it, and Cleveland was the obvious spot. There was a real chance that Oakland could have taken Watkins, and certainly if he had gotten beyond that, then Detroit and everyone else that was interested that we're not aware of would have been, upping their offers and doing what they can to move up. So I think the Bills just saw an opportunity and seized it.
Yeah.
By the way, real quick interlude. I'm pretty sure every time you type, my face disappears even though I'm talking.
So I should stop typing?
I don't know. Maybe we.
I'm not looking at the bottom of the comment section. So I don't know what people are saying. No, nobody's saying anything, so I don't know. All right. So the biggest rumor that also came out of that Tim Graham article on the Buffalo News is that Eric Ebron would have been the pick at number 9 had the board kind of fallen the same way it did, except for obviously without the Bills trading up. Would that have made you happy too, if they kept their first round next year and stuck with Eric Ebron at number 9 overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of reinforces that they wanted to get a guy for Manuel that changes the way teams have to defend them. I think if you were to ask Stevie Johnson whether he would have preferred that scenario, he may say yes. But again, that's just a scenario that was probably all along throughout the whole process was probably a plan B for them. Well, Ebron compares or pales in comparison to Watkins in terms of just overall talent, in terms of how polished he is as a prospect, how complete his game is. It's a night and day comparison between those two players, as especially ready to play in the NFL guys, but just in terms of long-term projection as well.
So talk about that polish then. What separates Sammy Watkins from the rest of the field? What put him at number one on the Bills board?
A combination of everything. He doesn't have ideal size, but he plays bigger than it. He can run after the catch. He can theoretically run the whole tree. He didn't do it at Clemson just because of the way they kind of tailored their offense to him. But he's capable of doing it. He's a smooth, precise route runner, and he will be fine in that department right away. And just, he has, I don't remember who said it exactly, it was probably Whaley, said he has no holes in his game, and I didn't see any in the admittedly far less that I watched him than those guys, obviously. But he's just a really, really good football player, and they, throw away the arguments about whether or not the trade was too rich. They got a really good prospect.
Okay. Sergeant Major Star likes to make fun of the whole camera flipping back and forth thing. I'll stop typing, guys. Jeez. My name's Matt Warren. I'm on with Brian Galliford from BuffaloRumblings.com. We're talking about Sammy Watkins because what else would we talk about? Well, we'll get to that other stuff in a little bit. So it's hard to get to this conversation without talking about Stevie. So let's do that. Let's just do it. Let's bite the bullet. Stevie Johnson got traded right around 3 o'clock this afternoon to the San Francisco 49ers for a conditional 2015 fourth-round pick, which just so happens to be the same fourth round that the Bills traded away as part of the Sammy Watkins deal. That could move up to a third-round pick based on stuff we don't know about yet. Have you seen the particulars of that yet?
It was, I think it's statistical performance.
Okay.
I saw something related to that. Nothing ironclad, though.
Okay, so the Bills are going to get either a fourth-round pick or a third-round pick in next year's draft for Stevie Johnson, which means they're going to get no help this year from trading away one of their highest-paid players. Is it a good move or a bad move? And just talk about that a little bit. Was it a good trade or a bad trade?
There are so many angles from which to approach that question that it's kind of ridiculous. So I'll do the three. I'll do the three that come to mind first. They have upgraded tremendously in terms of skill talent going from Stevie Johnson to Sammy Watkins. They have downgraded in terms of both production and risk, moving from Stevie Johnson to Mike Williams. That's the part that I don't necessarily like. I talked about that a little bit last night. That kind of rubs me the wrong way. Williams has that long list of issues off the field, and Stevie, he has his quirks. He rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but choir boy compared to Mike Williams, and it's just much more risk. They're similar contracts anyway, even though Mike Williams is on the down year. He's at under $2 million for the cap hit this year, so there's less risk in that sense, but really only in that sense. And then the third angle is just within the trade itself. I was a little bit surprised at the yield that the Bills got for Johnson. I didn't think they would be able to get that high a draft pick even next year, and then it can accelerate if he hits those incentives. It could become a third-round pick. That surprised me. I was pleased with that yield because I did not expect that at all.
You and me both. And he had to go to a team that had a considerable amount of cap space, and for him to go to a contender and be somewhere that's so close to his hometown, Stevie Johnson couldn't be a whole lot happier with the situation he ended up with, I don't think. I'm with you on the whole trusting Mike Williams thing. It's risky for sure, but maybe they look at Robert Woods and say to themselves, well, maybe we don't really need Mike Williams to even pan out. We can just use Robert Woods, and maybe Marquise Goodwin can step into a bigger role if something should happen with Mike Williams. Or maybe they're going to take a tight end today, and they don't have to worry about it too much because they're going to have plenty of guys catching passes for them. It's hard to understand that, but you talked about Stevie Johnson rubbing some people the wrong way. And by all reports, one of those people is Doug Marrone. What do you think about reports from, say, Joe Buscaglia at WGR that even as early as October, he got the sense that Doug Marrone and Stevie Johnson weren't on the same page.
I mean, I don't necessarily make much of it. That's just kind of the byproduct of a coaching change. There's always going to be those personnel oddities that pop up, and certain personalities mesh with others and some don't, and that's just kind of the change that teams have to go through. And unfortunately, it was one of the team's most popular players that ended up leaving. I mean, beyond that, that's kind of par for the course when you're talking about coaching turnover in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. I think it has just as much to do with the quarterback turnover as it does with the coach turnover. He had a very good rapport with Ryan Fitzpatrick. They were able to improvise together, and seeing him try to improvise with E.J. Manuel and Thad Lewis when they just hadn't really worked together a whole lot, especially because of E.J. Manuel's run of injuries all season, it didn't click like it did with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and it showed for sure. So unfortunate.
Yeah, that's not wrong. A lot was made of that relationship, the Fitz and Stevie relationship, and I mean that adjustment was probably more jarring just in terms of how Stevie played than the coaching adjustment. So there's probably a lot to that. It was a little bit of a bummer that it didn't get to play out. My cat's walking into frame. Hi.
So?
Yeah, I don't remember what I was talking about anymore. You guys are going to have to put up with Luna here for a couple minutes because she's an idiot. Are you kidding me right now?
I'm just going to let this happen.
Come on.
I love it. So if I talk, maybe Brian's cat will go away, and then we can resume football talk, like men or something like that. I don't know.
We're good.
Oh, okay, good. So now that we've at least chatted about Stevie Johnson not being with the Buffalo Bills anymore, what is Sammy Watkins' role going to be in 2014 as a rookie, paired up with they've had 4 new wide receivers in the last 2 off seasons? What's Watkins' role going to be other than he's the most talented wide receiver of the bunch, that we know, but what's he actually going to be able to do this year?
He's alpha dog. He's the guy. He is their number 1 target, bar none. He will play outside. Mike Williams will line up outside. Robert Woods will play in the slot. Robert Woods can play outside, so they'll have some malleability in terms of what they can do creatively with Watkins. And Marquise Goodwin will be their designated deep threat. And that's it. It has the shape of an extremely talented wide receiving core, assuming everyone can stay healthy and on the field and not in trouble. Mike Williams and Luna, stop getting in the frame, and they're in good shape. Even with Stevie out of the picture, and that's not. I mean, again, I would almost rather have Stevie than Mike Williams pretty much any day of the week. But I would say that Williams probably is more scheme diverse, probably fits better what they're trying to do on offense, regardless of the risk. And I'm excited about the fact that now they have drafted 3 receivers specifically to grow up with Manuel. And I think that was the plan all along. Get the skill guys in at the same time and let them grow up together, and we'll see how it pans out.
I like watching the cat keep coming back in the frame.
I think she's just going to be...
Oh,
go ahead.
Is that her rubbing up against the microphone?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Who is it? Trending Buffalo. I saw one of my favorite tweets of the entire day was when they said that they want Sammy Watkins to do an end around the left side and call it the Watkins Glen so he can come up on
nice. I like that.
Cordy Glenn's backside. It leads me to my next question. What do you think is going to be his impact outside of the passing game? Is he going to be in the backfield at all? Is he going to be returning kicks or things like that? Where do you see him playing outside of just the wide receiver position?
I doubt sincerely that they have any plans to take Marquise Goodwin out of the returner role. So I would be surprised if he factored heavily into the return game. I mean, they were not an especially creative offense last year. I mean, they had trouble getting C.J. Spiller the football, so I have sincere doubts about, just how creatively they're thinking with Watkins. I think they're probably just more focused on him being that guy, that go-to guy for E.J. Manuel. Um, but I mean, he obviously has that talent. Uh, the thought, just in a vacuum of having Watkins and Spiller on the field at the same time in the same offense is tantalizing. They're just supreme athletes. But the pressure is not just on EJ Manuel to develop with these guys on board. It's on Hackett and it's on Marone to kind of open up their offense a little bit and make sure that these guys are not just running through the motions of what's drawn on the field. They need to get these guys in space as much as possible.
Do you think this is a question right from Zen Bill on the comment section at BuffaloRumblings.com. He asked, can EJ Manuel improve his screen passing? Let's ask specifically about Watkins and the wide receiver screen, because that's one of the ways that Clemson got the ball in his hands a lot. And you mentioned that he was never really asked to run the route tree at Clemson, mainly because he would get screen passes and break them off for big games. Do you see that coming more into the Bills' offense this year now that they have Watkins?
I think their scheme is their scheme. They did a little of it last year, mostly with Stevie Johnson. That stuff was folded in. They can do it with not just Watkins, but Woods and Goodwin would be good at it as well. He's obviously got game-breaking speed and agility. He can do stuff like that. So you would hope that it would be in there, not just on receiver screens, but screen passes in general. EJ Manuel struggled with his ball placement last year. You may recall him trying to throw a screen pass to Spiller in Jacksonville and airmailing it by several yards for an interception, one of his ugliest plays of the year. Those are the very small elements of his game that he absolutely has to tidy up, and that seems like something that he can do, one of the simpler fixes that he can implement this offseason and over the summer in training camp. There is a little worry from me on that. Go ahead.
Is that a footwork issue, or is that?
I don't know enough about the technique side of it I'm just more about the yield, and I don't know what exactly went wrong. He did seem to be throwing off his back foot a little bit and kind of fading away from it on that throw in particular. But he just missed a lot of those, and that's those are the easiest throws you can make as an NFL quarterback. He's got to tighten that part of his game up.
All right. So how tall is Sammy Watkins?
6'3", I believe.
And so he's under 6'2", and so there's this, I don't know, the numbers we kept seeing coming out this draft season were that wide receivers drafted in the top 10 that are shorter than 6'2" don't pan out. Is there any of that concern? Do you have a concern that Sammy Watkins is going to be a huge bust for the Buffalo Bills?
No, I don't.
Why? Why?
Because I've seen him play for 3 years at Clemson, and I think he's a really good football player, and I'm not going to change my opinion on that because he's not 6'2".
Can he go up and get the ball in space?
Oh, yeah.
Go.
Absolutely. All right. Time to kick you out of there.
Isn't there some cat food you can put down or something? I don't know. What is
it? They're fed. They're just stupid.
They just love you.
Mm-hmm.
And love you. Just say love.
What was the question again about Mr. Watkins?
Talk about his leaping ability and how he's able to overcome his perceived lack of height. What's his ball catch radius, things like that?
Well, it's not Mike Evans' radius, but I mean, it's body control. He knows how to high point the football. He can, maneuver around defenders in the air. He just knows how to do it. It's an instinctual thing. It's just an ability that people have, and some don't. Watkins has it in spades. Go watch his touchdown catch, one of his many catches against Ohio State in the bowl game last year. He goes up in the air and plucks a ball away from a contested ball away as if there was no defender there. He's just good at it, and that's not a height thing. It's not an arm length thing. It's just being really good at his craft, and he just naturally has these things that other receivers don't.
Yeah.
What do you got, man?
Sorry, I didn't hear the end of your answer, and so I wasn't sure what was happening, if my internet was kicking out or something like that. So yeah, I've seen those highlights too, and I like that. And actually, that's the first thing that Doug Whaley brought up when he was talking about Watkins after they had picked him, was they went to his pro day and they left early because they watched him do some crazy, what you were saying, body control thing to make the catch. And he's like, I mean, I think we suited up. We could leave. And so Doug Whaley and the scouts actually left the Clemson pro day early because, you know, Sammy Watkins was Sammy Watkins and pretty darn good at being Sammy Watkins and going up and getting the ball and doing whatever he needed to do with his body to get to it. Which is another thing I wanted to talk to you about, his physicality. I've seen a lot of highlights of him bowling over defensive backs. Is that something that you think he'll be able to do in the NFL, or is that something he should probably avoid?
I don't consider him a particularly physical guy. He's more about agility once he has the ball in his hands. I mean, he can break tackles, but he's not going to drag defenders or anything like that. He's physical in the sense that he plays bigger than he is. He seems bigger when he's running routes and going up for balls and things like that. But he's not like Rob Gronkowski or even Mike Evans, who will drag guys, or like a Safarian Jenkins, who's known to drag defenders. And he's not that guy. He draws comparisons to Percy Harvin because they're very similar with the ball in their hands, and Harvin's not really physical after the catch either. So I think that's an apt comparison just in terms of that particular skill. And I mean, yes, he can break tackles. He has enough. He's 211 pounds. He's not a little dude by any means. But he's more about, you know, maneuvering around guys and through them.
Okay. As we transition away from our conversation on Sammy Watkins and the Stevie Johnson trade, Sergeant Major Thor asked, how do you think the guys on the team are taking Stevie being traded? I've been away from Twitter. I haven't seen anybody publicly say anything except for the very nice tweet Stevie Johnson sent out that a lot of my followers retweeted, and saying that he loves being in Buffalo and Buffalo gave him his first chance in embracing with open arms. What do you think the guys in the locker room are going to think about trading Stevie Johnson?
I mean, the refrain will be it's a business. It always is. I don't know enough about the dynamics of how that locker room works to say anything other than basically platitudes. Johnson is a popular guy, not just in the fan base, but probably, you know, within that organization. I mean, it's not often that a guy in power like Russ Brandon or Doug Whaley, which it was Whaley today, will go out of his way to acknowledge a guy's commitment to a city and to an organization as he leaves it. I thought that was telling, just in terms of how he's viewed by the team and how much respect they have for him. So I think that probably permeates from the top down to the locker room. It's a tough call, because he was one of those guys that, you know, the Bills kind of have this reputation, especially you know, among the cynical, that they let their talent walk once it's developed, and Stevie was one of those guys that the Bills said he's homegrown talent, we're keeping him. They gave him a good market value, and now 2 years later he's gone. So you wonder what kind of message it sends, but at the same time I don't think that the players are so naive that they can't see that they have added dynamic talent and have gotten better at that position this year.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Sammy Watkins, Stevie Johnson before we move on? I mean, we got, 6 more rounds of this draft thing to talk about.
No, I'm good. What do you have to say? Anything?
About Stevie and Sammy? I don't know enough about Sammy Watkins to be thrilled or not. I'm glad that they went out and got the first guy on their board, and that's pretty much where I started and end with it. As far as Stevie goes, I was never one that was fully enamored with him. I loved that he could get open and improvise with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he never seemed like he got on the same page with E.J. Manuel, and apparently wasn't on the same page with Doug Marrone. And so I think moving forward, this is probably within the best interest of the team. I just don't love the fact that they traded next year's first-round pick in order to do it. But they got that sweetener pick, as Doug Whaley referred to it, or actually it was Tim Graham in his article, that sweetener pick, the 4th rounder next year back. So I'm okay. I know there's a lot of people on our board that are probably really, really upset that Stevie Johnson isn't on this team anymore. and I
I
totally
can
understand
confirm that
why.
there are a lot of people that are upset by the trade.
And I understand why, and that doesn't make us better this year, and lots of other stuff. But all of that's true. Yeah, he loved Buffalo, and he was our spokesperson when nobody talked about loving Buffalo, and that was awesome. And at some point, that can't be the only thing that we love him for. He's got to produce on the field, and he obviously didn't this year for a variety of reasons, and they decided they were going to move on. Doug Whaley, man, he's got stones. And that's about
Yeah,
as
say what you
colorful.
want about him, but he
That's
definitely is not meek. He does what he thinks is right.
that's about as salty language as you're going to hear from me on this podcast. But just think about what he's done. Even if you don't include taking E.J. Manuel last year when Buddy Nix was manager. I mean, just this offseason, he signs Brandon Spice. He makes a huge trade for Mike Williams. He makes a huge trade for Sammy Watkins, and then trades Stevie Johnson. And that stuff has all happened in the last, 3 months? 4 months?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 3 months. And the guy is just, it's like he's in my brain and taking risks. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense, the risk versus the reward. And he seems like he's doing that when in the past we've always been like, well, the risk is too high or the cost is too high. And I love the fact that he's making these moves. Whether they work out or not, it's really anybody's guess at this point in time, and Whaley would probably be the first guy to tell you that. But with the information they had, they made the best decision they thought, and they went with it, and I love that. So even more than Stevie and Sammy, I love that Doug Whaley is making these decisions.
Yeah, they are decisions that command respect, even if you disagree with them, because they are decisions made with authority.
Yeah, there's no apathy coming from One Bills Drive right now. Whether, like I keep referring to, whether or not that has to do with the ownership situation is one thing, but even if it does, he's smart enough to realize that he's short on time and he's changing his approach for it. All right, let's move on to the rest of the 2014 NFL Draft. Dan Rocks was the first question in our comments this morning. Given who's on the board, who do you want the Bills to take at 41?
I don't necessarily have a preferred prospect, quite frankly. My guy Jimmy Ward went 30th overall yesterday to San Francisco, which, I mean, how many times could San Francisco take guys that I like in the last 24 hours? First Jimmy and then Stevie. I mean, there are the two sore spots, well, actually three sore spots, D-end and tackle and tight end, that they could address with any number of rock-solid prospects, and it would be a totally acceptable move. They need a contributor at end, at least. They need a contributor at tight end, at least preferably one with movement skills. And they need a starter at right tackle. And, I mean, that probably alone, the fact that they need that starter, might prioritize that position going into tonight. The tackle position is a little thinned out after last night. There are some guys that make sense there. At minimum, you would hope that they'd use one of their two picks tonight on that position and hope that that player as well can at least compete, but hopefully just walk right into the starting lineup. The guy that I like there is Quanjo. Knee concerns aside, I think he's clearly the best athletic talent. There's the Richardson kid from Tennessee, Tiny Richardson, who's anything but tiny. He is sort of probably closest to the prototype in terms of what they look for athletically in offensive linemen, or what they have historically looked at athletically. And then there's the Moses kid, Morgan Moses from Virginia, who again he would be a snug fit as a plug and play starter. I'm a little cooler on him than probably the other two, but there are options. It'll be interesting to see if any of them are available, because there are other guys. The tight ends, Troy Nicholas and Safarian Jenkins, they are names to watch tonight. Scott Crichton, the D-end from Oregon State, is a name to watch. And a guy that not enough people are thinking about right now is Bashad Breeland, the cornerback from Clemson. He is quietly one of the hotter names of the draft right now, and the Bills are, still maybe one or two guys short of having quality depth in the defensive backfield. And Breeland is a guy that brings physicality to the cornerback position, and they don't necessarily have a lot of that beyond Stephon Gilmore, especially if Corey Graham plays safety. So he is a guy that I think is a strong dark horse candidate for this pick in round 2.
And you just happened to go through all of the pre-draft visitors that I tweeted out this morning and this afternoon. Defensive end Scott Creighton, offensive tackle Quanjo, and then cornerback Breland, and then the tight end Safarian Jenkins and Nicholas. All were pre-draft visitors with the Bills, which is generally been a strong indicator that the Bills really, really like them, as long as they check out medically. I'm looking at you, Quanjo. But those guys, at least one of them should be available when the Bills pick, especially if there's a run on wide receivers and quarterbacks at the top, like some people are talking about. There could also be a run on offensive tackles, like you said. There was, how many went yesterday? 5? 5.
Oh, I don't remember exactly. I think it was 5.
I think it ended up being 5. Offensive tackles went yesterday. There is still some depth, as you explained, but those guys are all would make a ton of sense for the Bills to take today as we go into round 2. And tons of people have been asking about Nicholas. Using the hashtag BRLive, Zach Hayes asked if there was any chance Buffalo could rank Troy Nicholas. Of course there is. If you want to follow us on Twitter, I'm at Matt Rich Warren, Brian's at Brian Galliford. And then there's a lot more folks in our comment section asking about Troy Nicholas. Why do you think that people like him more than, say, well, I'll just go with the easy comparison, Safarian Jenkins?
I think it probably has to do, frankly, in part with bloodlines. He is a cousin to Jake Matthews. He is, by extension, part of that Matthews family tree. He's also a well-rounded player in that he's a very good blocker already, and he has upside as a receiver. He's almost viewed as a poor man's Gronkowski just in terms of what he offers dimensionally down the seam. He's tall, he's 6'7", and he's angular. He's much nimbler after the catch than a lot of people think. He's raw. I'm not sure he's ready to walk into an NFL lineup and contribute at a high level, but he's got very good upside, and he will probably play tight end in this league for quite a while. I think the fact that he's well-rounded and that he can, play, run and pass, and how that plays into how offenses are schemed. They're not going to telegraph run or pass, by having as an alternative theory, if they had an Ebron and a Lee Smith, that combination telegraphs it, and Nicholas doesn't. He can do both, so I think that's probably the appeal with him.
Yeah, Luke Hurton in our comment section, Kush to push. I could go through a ton of love for him.
Did you say Kush?
Kush to push. Yeah.
Yeah, Kush is the biggest Troy Nicholas fan on the planet. Hi, Kush.
Okay. So, just give. I'm trying to figure out how I want to ask that question. Do you think you mentioned that Nicholas was raw and wouldn't be able to necessarily step into the starting lineup right away? Do you think that's their ultimate goal with the second-round pick? Is someone that they can plug and play right away, whether it's a right tackle or a tight end or even defensive end, where a guy like Creighton would at least get a lot of wave snaps with Jerry Hughes or whoever else maybe win or something like that. Do you think that the ability to play right away is super important to them with this second-round pick?
Yeah, and it should be. I mean, they're on a nice little hot streak with their second-round picks.
Yeah, they are.
Cordy Glenn, Robert Woods, and Nico Alonso have been dynamite. And who was 11? Oh, Aaron Williams. Aaron Williams was a very good second-round pick, or turned out to be a very good second-round pick as well.
And you forgot about Torrell Troop.
I didn't. I was just about to mention Torrell Troop, but you interrupted me. Yeah. That was the major problem with the Troop selection, in that he came in. They were talking about switching to a 3-4 scheme. He was going to platoon with Kyle Williams, and that dude was never going to take away a ton of snaps from Kyle Williams because he's Kyle Williams. So, I mean, that was just a wasted draft pick in terms of not getting a guy that's going to play a lot. And that was the biggest issue, and then, it snowballed into Troop's back problems, and the rest is history. But just philosophically, the pick was bad because he wasn't going to be an every-down player, and they were obviously a significantly less talented team at that time, and they couldn't afford, rolling with a guy who wasn't going to play and didn't offer much long-term upside to begin with. So I think their focus the last 3 drafts, and hopefully 4 with tonight, is finding second-round picks that can play a lot of snaps right away. I think you could argue that the tight ends available won't do that. Obviously, they're really good prospects, but I don't think any of them are slam dunks to just walk in and play much more than 50% of snaps. And I think you might even say the same thing about D end. So again, that just goes back into the idea that tackle is easily their biggest focal point tonight. They need a guy who can start, and that starter, if he stays healthy, will play 1,100 snaps next season. So that would be an ideal second-round pick.
Yeah, I think you and I were on the same page with that for a long time, that you really wanted the Bills to take a skill position player in the first round and then grab one of those depth defensive tackles in the second round so that they could plug him and play. The guy we haven't talked about yet, Coney Ely. Is that how you say his name?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't come in for a pre-draft workout. Would he fit on the Bills at defensive end? Ecliptic asks that.
Absolutely. Yeah, without question. He is unfairly compared to Aldon Smith just because they both went to Missouri. Not nearly as dynamic an athlete, but he can play end. A lot of teams want him to bulk up and play inside, so he's kind of that outside-in rusher where, Mario Williams is cut from the same cloth. Again, different type of athlete. Williams is a better athlete, but he's not the elite edge rusher. He kind of makes his hay, starting outside, working back in, hustle plays. That's kind of Mario's forte, and Ely's cut from the same cloth. He has some work to do against the run. He needs to sort of develop physically. He's a young kid, but he offers starter's upside, and that's big at defensive end in the NFL. He would be another guy that he might not play as much as some of the other positions right away, but with that much talent, I think you could justify the pick, and he would play a lot as a rookie just because they're going to use waves at that position.
Jason from Ohio asked about Carlos Hyde. As an OSU fan, I have had an opportunity to watch him play weekly. I'm convinced he's going to be a stud. How surprised would you be if the Bills took him in the second round?
Not at all. I wouldn't be surprised if they were considering a guy like Jeremy Hill either. They clearly had an emphasis on bringing in running backs for pre-draft visits throughout the spring. That's a position they're looking hard at. It may be a little rich for them this evening just because they definitely don't need a guy that can play right away at that position because they have Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller. But, you never know how the board will break. And if they don't like any of the tackles or the ends or the corners and they can't trade down, what the heck? Why not take a guy like Carlos Hyde? Because they do have a long-term need at that position. And to come this time next year when Fred might be gone because he'll be 34 years old and his contract will be up, and CJ might not be back, that Hyde pick might look much better just in terms of foresight.
Yeah, then you're keeping 4 running backs on the roster with Anthony Dixon, presumably guaranteed a spot. What about fullback? This is just a general question. Do you think they keep a fullback if they keep 4 running backs on the roster?
Sure, why not? They kept 2 fullbacks last year, at least for the back half of the season. So, they're a power running offense when you get right down to it. They're trying to rebuild their passing attack clearly, but I think that it's very clear and has been for a long time that the base, the foundation of that offense is the running game. They're going to run the football a lot, and I think you need bodies back there, and the more talent, the better.
Yeah, DC Buffalo Bills wanted us to just kind of go over the Storer contract situation. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Fred Jackson has 1 year left on his deal, and he's 34 years old. So that's why we're talking a little bit more about running backs than maybe you might think when you're looking back at the stats or looking forward to what the Bills have this year. If you look up ahead of here, they've got Anthony Dixon on the roster and nobody else. So that's why they're talking about taking a running back. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it happened tonight, but I would rather they do it tomorrow on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think they would rather do it that way as well.
Yeah, moving into Saturday, we talked about defensive ends. We talked about a little bit about the cornerback position with one guy. We talked obviously about offensive tackle and tight ends and stuff like that. Where do you think the Bills are going to look to add depth in the fourth through seventh rounds, outside of the sixth round, obviously, because they don't have a sixth-round pick? Where do you think they're going to add depth in this draft? What position?
I mean, I don't think, other than maybe defensive tackle, they can be choosy about it. They kind of need. I mean, they can't be picky about where they add depth anywhere. They would be fine drafting pretty much any position once they get these, two or three of these needs hammered out. I think a position that isn't talked about enough maybe is interior offensive line. They have made a concerted effort to get more athletic there. I think the fact that they brought in Marcus Martin from USC on a pre-draft visit speaks to that as well. Chris Williams is more athlete than football player, and they signed him, and they gave him a good deal, and he's going to start. And I think they were just, looking at his athleticism and saying that's something we can work with. Whereas, last year, Doug Legursky doesn't offer much in terms of athletic talent. So I think that's the upgrade they're trying to make right now. They might take a project-type guy, and that's true for tackle as well. They need more athleticism in general up front. So that would be a worthwhile investment on day 3 for me.
Okay. You haven't talked about linebackers yet, and I think that linebacker is definitely a place where they not only should look in the later rounds of the draft, but need to look to get a guy inside. And I said this last night on our podcast that I really don't want Ty Powell to be the guy backing up Brandon Spikes in the middle, even if he's only a 2-down player. I don't want a guy as physical as Brandon Spikes, especially a guy who missed some significant time last year, to be the only guy between me and, I keep saying his name, and it sounds like I'm being a jerk, but between Ty Powell and starting inside linebacker. I want to see them draft a guy that can learn behind Spikes and maybe be ready to step in a year if Spikes decides to leave. So I would rather see them spend one of these earlier picks, maybe even tonight, on an inside linebacker that could step in for Spikes at some point, but a more complete type of player than Spikes is, whether he wants to admit it or not.
It might be tremendously difficult for them to find. In fact, it will be tremendously difficult for them to find a 3-down linebacker at this point. But they brought in Preston Brown from Louisville. He's that 2-down guy. He would be a very good backup middle linebacker for a year. If they don't bring Spikes back, he's got starter upside just in that specific role. He would be the kind of linebacker that they would look at on late day 2 or day 3. And that's not wrong. That's a position that they should look at. I think even Doug Whaley mentioned it at the pre-draft luncheon that they wanted more linebacker depth. And frankly, one of my favorite prospects left today is Kyle Van Noy, the outside linebacker from BYU. He would be an ideal fit as the Sam linebacker in Jim Schwartz's defense. And I don't think the Bills will look at him just because they have Keith Rivers and Manny Lawson that they can have a competition with there. But Van Noy is a really good prospect. He's going to make some team happy.
Do you think the Bills are going to weight their draft picks towards one side of the ball? I think we were all in agreement that they were going to give Manuel a ton of help in the first and probably second round. What about the rest of the draft? Say rounds 3 through 7. Do you think they're going to spend it evenly? Are they just going to go on their board, or are they going to weight one side of the ball or the other?
I think they'll probably just follow the board because that goes back to just the general depth discussion that we just had. They just need talent at the back end of their roster. I mean, really what they're trying to do is build 53. They need a 53-man unit, and they know where they have, like, for example, right now the way that the roster shapes up, they might go in with their final 3 linemen. They'll probably carry 9 linemen. Most teams do. They would have a guy like Unga and Mark Asper and even Chris Hairston, who is an unknown commodity just in terms of his health at this point. Those guys would be on the roster, so they would have to be comfortable carrying 1 or 3 of those guys. And if they're not, then they would try to upgrade on those players. That's kind of, I think, how they would approach. They're trying to build a 53. They're not necessarily just trying to add bodies. So they would sort of analyze what they're comfortable with and what they're not in terms of personnel, and pick those spots and move on and make decisions from there.
Okay, Ron asked an intriguing question. With getting the 2015 pick San Francisco, do you think that it might entice the Bills to use another 2015 pick in a trade up tonight? Just because
Ron and his trade scenarios.
he loves those trade scenarios.
He definitely does. I don't expect them to trade tonight. They might trade down, but I don't expect them to trade up. I don't think that they would look at any of these guys as must-have prospects the way they would have maybe a year ago when they picked up that pick and said, hey, we can get Kiko Alonso now. I don't know that there's that type of player available at their specific need areas. They may just fall in love with a guy at a position, random, like cornerback or something that they love. And
Did you say quarterback?
I said cornerback. Corner. Stop putting letter in my mouth. Actually, no. Like if they liked a guy like Breland and they thought that San Francisco was going to take him, they might look at moving up. But I think that there's probably a line that Whaley's comfortable crossing in terms of exactly how bold he can be, and he used up a lot of his quota last night. So I would expect him to stand pat.
Right. I know that you were looking at safety in the second round. You obviously made that pick. Do you still think that they're going to take a safety at some point in the early enough rounds for it to make a difference in 2014?
No, I don't.
Okay. That comes from Jeff Beck, that question.
Thanks, Jeff. No, I don't believe they will. That position got picked dry last night. Ward went in the first round. The only guy left that's really a unique player at that position is Joyner from Florida State, who is kind of a Nickel Roby hybrid type in that he lines up in specific areas of the field. He's almost like a nickelback, and he's a playmaker, and he's a lot of fun to watch. But I'm not sure that the Bills would pick him, knowing that A, they already have Roby, and B, that's not really the prototype of what they're looking for in safety at the back end of their defense. So I would be surprised if they took a safety. I would think that they would focus more on sort of the type of cornerback that they've been known to look at, the bigger, more physical guys that can maybe transition between the two.
All right, so here's just a question based on one we got last night. We've got 5 minutes left before the second round of the draft starts. What would super irritate you tonight? I won't say get angry because I doubt you're going to get angry at pretty much anything we do, but what would make you vote disapprove on a draft pick tonight?
Nothing. Honestly, nothing. I would have a hard time probably getting behind a running back pick, even though, again, I refuse to admit that it's impossible because I think that they're looking at that position hard. But it just doesn't make sense tonight. But, again, you never know how the board will drop. If they don't have any other choice, really, then it makes sense long-term. But it does not make sense for the 2014 Bills. And that was clearly their emphasis last night. And I would expect it to remain their emphasis tonight.
I don't know if you've been following along. I don't know what you've been doing while we've been doing our little Google Hangout here, but apparently word came down while we were on air that Josh Gordon is facing a 1-year suspension for a failed marijuana test. Do you think, the Twiptic asks, we can give them T.J. Graham or Mike Williams for a third round pick?
No. I don't.
Really? No. And it's the same thing.
I know, it's a bold stance, but no, I don't think that would happen.
With the Jaguars and their suspension. Who is it? Justin Black? No. Was it Blackman?
It was Blackman, yeah.
Okay. With Justin Blackman looking at suspension, people thought that they might just bite the bullet and take Sammy Watkins at 3 and not let the Bills get him at 4. I don't think that teams are in the business of doing knee-jerk reactions, at least not at this point in the year. There's still options available to them, whether it's in the draft, whether it's in some of that, I don't know, free agency, or even the first round of cuts in August. You might see reactions, say, when Donald Brown or something like that gets injured and the Colts make a call up and make a trade with the Browns in the middle of the season. That type of urgency isn't around now. So no, I don't think we could send T.J. Graham, Mike Williams, and a third-round pick to the Browns and get a third-round pick back from them.
Yep, I completely agree, and thought you stated it eloquently.
Yeah, good for me. I don't know who these people why those people have to be about those. Anyway, so is there anything else you want to leave us with before the second round of the draft kicks off, so to speak?
Be nice to each other, guys. We're all Bills fans.
Hello?
It was a little heated on that Stevie Johnson thread this
Oh, I
afternoon,
can't hear
so
you.
maybe just like slow
Keep
your
talking.
roll, calm down, and enjoy your evening. The Bills are getting better. They're doing interesting things, and I get that it's the season to be loud and be proud and share your opinions, and that's great. We love everyone that comes by the site, but man alive, it gets a little crazy. So help a brother out, help us out, and just enjoy yourselves tonight. It should be a fun evening.
Okay, I see that you're done talking. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Because I can't hear anything you're saying. So with that, let's. Your
I
mouth
just
was
thought you like Earth's biggest.
technical difficulties.
I have
It's been
no
so much
idea.
fun.
This is hilarious.
All right, guys. Well, with that,
What should I
we'll
call
sign
that
out.
right
You're probably just being mean, aren't you?
Oh man, that was funny. Okay.
I'll have to listen back to it. Anyway, with that, we're gonna say good luck in the 2000. Stop talking while I'm talking. Good luck in the 2014 Buffalo Bills draft. Buffalo Bills, and go Bills. Say go Bills.
Go Bills.